Hey guys, this is Andrew with SHTF Honey Badger, and I'm coming to you with, in my opinion, a major breaking news update that I saw released today. So, as all of us have probably been tracking out there, and most of us have at least seen some different news information on, there was an attack on the power grid in Monroe County, North Carolina, this past weekend. Well, it just came out today that Department of Homeland Security announced that there's actually multiple attacks that occurred over this weekend. The reality is the attack in Monroe, North Carolina was the attack that got the attention. It was the attack that caused the most damage, but there is actually similar styled attacks that occurred in Washington State and Oregon State. So this changes that dynamic quite a bit. This went from something that maybe was just a lone wolf actor out there to potentially a actually coordinated attack. Because to be honest with you, I don't believe in coincidences, especially times 3. So in all likelihood, this was some sort of coordinated attack. Now the real question that's going to boil down to is, was this a coordinated attack that was a test run, or was this supposed to be the big display? And I bring this up because, as I mentioned in some other videos, a major attack on U.S. infrastructure, specifically stuff like the power grid, is a very realistic possibility. Our power stations throughout this country, with the exception of nuclear stations, are very lackluster in their defenses, and our substations basically have non-existent defenses. If you're anything like the power companies around me, you maybe have an unarmed guard that drives by and checks on them like once a night to make sure there's not a hole in the fence or the lock's cut off. But the reality is those substations, which many of you rely on because there's usually a substation somewhere between you and that plant that's producing the power, are very well soft targets. And the fact that this, to me, almost looks more like a test run than an actual targeted attack is something that's concerning. This is very easily something that can spiral into a major SHTF situation, because keep in mind, for example, we saw down in Monroe, North Carolina, the items damaged, from my understanding, were transformers. Those are very large and expensive items to move, and they are not something that power companies keep major reserves of. You don't have power companies out there with big yards filled with dormant transformers. Those are items that cost in the hundreds of thousands, if not into the millions of dollars, to produce and to purchase for those companies. So they don't keep extras. They just really don't. If something breaks, they have to get it shipped in. And if we see some sort of mass coordinated attack, say 10 times what we saw over this past weekend, that could cause major damage. They had a 33% success rate, whoever this entity is that did it, on causing power outages. Imagine that times 10 spread throughout the country. Depending on which substations they hit too, it could be significantly larger amounts of people that are without power. We actually almost got fortunate when you look at this particular attack and realizing that only 1 out of 3 was successful, and the one that was successful only impacted about 45,000 people. You have substations in places closer to major cities and metropolitan areas that could affect hundreds of thousands of people, including medical facilities, for example. And again, as we've seen down in North Carolina, it's been for lack of a better word, it's been a complete cluster. This was something that just was not really anticipated or prepared for. And just what I'm seeing come out is this is telling me that it's not probably the end. This is probably the beginning, because Department of Homeland Security has come out to and mentioned that they do have warnings out there. And one of the items outside of their normal dog and pony show list that they say is going to be at risk here is major infrastructure. And to be honest with you, that's not something we see too often, them out there actually saying publicly. We all know major infrastructure is always a soft target and something that has a lot of risk to it. But for DHS to actually come out here and say, major infrastructure such as power grids, gas systems are a major target potentially right now, it's concerning. Especially more concerning than that even is you don't even know who the perpetrators are. I've seen some of the news outlets, kind of throwing gum at the wall and seeing what sticks, trying to say certain groups did it. But the reality is nobody has actually, from what I've been able to find, claimed responsibility. And that's another big factor to consider, because we don't even know the actor behind this right now. While it's very possible this could be some sort of a minor domestic terrorist organization, it's even possible this could be a state-sponsored actor. And somebody might look at me and laugh or think I'm crazy for saying that, but when you have some place like Russia over here making all sorts of havoc, what's a better way to distract us from helping out over there or sending stuff overseas to supply Europe with natural gas or supply weapons to a country like Ukraine than crippling the power grid over here? Because the reality is, if our power grid's crippled like that, we're going to be very distracted and not focused on helping out over there. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities either. This could be something like a state-sponsored actor simply hoping to divert attention away from other areas in the globe right now. So I want you guys to all be out there keeping your heads on a swivel. Stay safe. You know, if you have your generators right now, get your generators out, test them, make sure they're working. If you haven't switched out your fuel in a while, switch out your fuel. Make sure that you have good fuel sitting aside and then you have several days worth of fuel for those generators. Because the fact is, if we see this on a much larger scale, it may not be a matter of, 4 to 5 days to see power come back up. It may be a matter of several weeks. Because again, as I mentioned, the transformers that were damaged that had to be, from my understanding, replaced, very expensive items. They're not easy to move either. They're very difficult to move. It's not something you can put on a normal 18-wheeler and drive down the street. Typically, you have to actually move power lines, move stoplights to move those through. And they're very big, oversized loads. And there's not a plethora of them sitting around just waiting for stuff like this to happen. So the larger the event, the more dangerous this could really turn out to be. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Because like I said, I think this really changes the dynamic. This went from a lone wolf style attack potentially to what sounds to me like a coordinated test run by some sort of group out there. So stay safe, stay prepared, keep your heads on a swivel, and we'll see you guys around.